right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Route Consultant Weekly Webinar. For those of you that are here for the first time, my name is Josh Gregory. I am the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. All that means is I work with both of our new buyers that are looking to get into the space for the first time and with contractors who are trying to understand how to better improve their business and be on top of all of the things that are changing all the time in this industry. For everyone else who's here every week, it's good to see you again and welcome back. And whether this is your first time or you're here every single week and have been for years, we still want this to be a place where everyone can come together, learn a little bit, ask some questions, and make sure that we all have a place to communicate and collaborate together. So before I go too much farther, I do have a quick disclaimer that I have to read as I do every week. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. All that to say, that is the official disclaimer I have to read, but we do want to make sure that these still continue to be informative and a way for, like I said, everyone to come together, learn, and ask questions. So the format for today, if you've never been here, is that we're going to go through some content at the beginning. And then I'm going to go over all the new things, events that are coming up. And then at the end, we will have a pure open Q&A. So anything that you want to talk about, anything that's whether it's questions on what we talk about today or anything in the FedEx space at large, we're happy to answer. So just importantly, you can be thinking of those questions as we're talking, but make sure that if you want those questions answered, that you put them in the Q&A button at the bottom of this window. If you put those questions into the chat, I'll miss it. So make sure you're actually clicking on that Q&A button and you can load those questions in as we're talking, or you can save them for the end. We'll make sure to answer as many questions as we have in the time that we have left at the end. Now, for today, just for those of you who've been around for a while, we're going to start adding a little bit more of a focus on having some more regular line haul content in addition to our P&D content. So today, what we're going to be doing is focusing on understanding peak season on the line haul side, but more importantly for the timeline right now is understanding the strategy for how to distribute your points and handle those after peak season. And to help us talk about the line haul side, we've actually brought on Alex Frum to partner with us on these. And so Alex, if you want to go ahead and come on, I see you there already. If you just want to quickly say hello, and then many of them have not met you. So if you just want to give a little bit of background on kind of how you found the FedEx space and what your journey has been to get to the point that you are now.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. As Josh mentioned, my name is Alex Frum. I'm a current FedEx line haul contractor with operations in Northern Kentucky Terminal, which is Independence, Kentucky, Memphis, Tennessee, and Olive Branch, Mississippi. I started in this business about 5 years ago, a little bit over 5 years ago, buying 4 routes in Memphis, Tennessee, then quickly grew into the Northern Kentucky terminal when there was an opportunity there, and then expanded into Olive Branch. So from my 4 runs that I initially bought, I've grown to 26 runs now and 31 tractors, in 3 states, and I'm still looking to grow. I love being a FedEx contractor. It gives me the flexibility and the stability in my life that I've always been looking for. Prior to this, I was in the Army for 5 years, and then I worked on Wall Street as a trader and as a salesperson for 15 years.
Yeah, and so a lot of insight there, operating in different places at scale. So as we're talking about this today, know that Alex is someone who continues to operate and has operated for years in this space. So like I said, we'll have, if you have questions for someone who's in the space right now, we'll have those at the end to go through. Now, I mentioned that we're going to talk a little bit around strategy, around peak season and peak points, but there are some who are on this call who have never heard of it. So let's just take a quick step back. And if you could give an overview of how the peak season incentives work on the line haul side.
Yeah, so peak is very different from on the P&D side, which some of you might be familiar with or not. So on the line haul side, peak generally runs from late October into the first week of January. This year it ended on January 12th. There are 2 components to peak. The first component is your peak mileage incentive. This year it was 25 cents per mile in excess of your baseline threshold. So the baseline is a weighted average number of miles over an 8-week period. This year it ran from mostly May and June. And then what they did was if you take your baseline miles of say 10,000 miles, your threshold was set at 3% above that. So any miles in excess of that 3% you were paid an additional 25 cents per mile. And that lasted the entire peak season. So if you did in excess of 10,300 miles and you did 10,301 mile, you were paid 25 cents. If you did, an additional 10,000 miles, you'd be paid $2,500 per week on that settlement. The other component is points. So points are set at 10%, 15%, and 20% of your threshold. And then you are awarded 10 points per tractor on your Schedule A1 for every, when you establish that threshold. So if you use that same example again of 10,000 miles, your threshold would be set at 11,000 miles, at 11,500 miles, and at 12,000 miles. So in excess of those points, you would then receive 10 points per tractor on your Schedule A1. And remember, this is not spare tractors that are included. It's only the tractors that are assigned or unassigned on your Schedule A1.
Yeah, perfect. And I think just a quick thought on what are points for, even one step back for those who may not even know what they are.
So think of points as the currency to bid and use to grow organically within the FedEx system. So points account for roughly 40% of the score that FedEx uses to bid on, or for when contractors bid on assigned runs. There are other components to it, but points account for the largest portion of that. The other components are safety, service, availability, and technology. So we just finished off peak. Peak ended January 12th. It was, successful for some people, not successful for other people. It's always a function of how well you plan ahead of time. And we can discuss about how you prepare yourself in the future to have a successful peak. For me, it was a very successful peak. I planned accordingly, made the most of it, and I earned a lot of points. So I know that I'm going to be getting my points. I don't know exactly what they are. I have a pretty good idea, but on February 18th, FedEx is going to release all the points to the contractors, so you know exactly what you have. It's going to be on your run point assignment statements that you can find on your MyBiz account. From there, then you have about a month from February 19th to May 18th to allocate your points on however you want. And you can put your points on any tractor. Okay, any tractor that's on your A1, you can assign those points to. If you don't assign your points, and this is really important to understand, FedEx will evenly distribute the points across all the tractors for you beginning March 19th. So points, we all have points now. Say we have 1,000 points. So the question is, where do you allocate them? And this is unique to each contractor. Okay, you have to remember that you can use any tractor in that domicile to bid on a run. So if FedEx posts a new team run in Memphis, I can use an unassigned tractor. I can use an assigned tractor. I can use a solo tractor, or I can use a team tractor. So it doesn't matter, but you can bid on anything you want. You can use a PM solo tractor to bid on an AM solo position. You can, vice versa. So it's important for you to understand what is your domicile, what is the location, and where do you have the most growth opportunities. So for me, I'm looking at, my business in Noki. I'm looking at my business in Memphis. I'm looking at my business in Olive Branch. Where are my opportunities? Where are my unassigned tractors? Do I want to convert my unassigned tractors into assigned runs? Or do I have a low mileage assigned run that I really want to goose with a lot of points so that I can convert that low mileage assigned run into a high mileage assigned run? And why do I want a high mileage assigned run? Well, there's more revenue. There's a greater margin on that. And it means I've just increased my equity in the business by having a high mileage run. High mileage runs are more attractive and more interesting and are, and sell for higher multiples than a low mileage run.
And just to clarify for people, you've got this chunk of points. Can they move those points between terminals, or are they attached to the terminal in which you domicile?
So once you lock the points in, you cannot move them. Okay. And so any points that you go into peak with are the points that are on that tractor. So if you have a tractor that has 2,500 points in Memphis and a tractor that with 2,700 points in Noki, you can't exchange points between the two tractors. The only thing you can do is increase the points by allocating your points that you received in peak to that specific tractor.
Yeah.
And that's also important to know, because one of the things that you need to know is you want to do some research and talk to other contractors and figure out, okay, I'm in Memphis, and from there, I might be able to get a new run with 2,500 points. But in Noki, I can get a new run with 5,000 points. Well, Noki is where I want to grow, so I'm going to have to allocate more of my points to Noki than to Memphis, or vice versa. So it's important to understand what has historically been the place where points have been awarded. New terminals usually don't take as many points to win a run, whereas in Memphis, or in an old terminal, say like Memphis, which is one of the original RPS terminals. And if you don't know what RPS is, that's Route Package System, the business that FedEx bought in 1996. So that's an original terminal. It takes a lot of points to win an assigned run during the bidding process.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say you're new. Let's say you've only been in the space for, 8 months. You started maybe like last March. What are the best ways to kind of get a sense for where growth may be, or who do you talk to? What questions do you ask to start to get a sense for how things have transacted, and where are the most critical places to put your points?
Well, obviously, you want to talk to other contractors. You want to talk to the terminal manager. Your senior line haul manager is a good source. You don't want to talk to the dispatcher. And even talking to a senior planner might not help you. A senior planner usually knows what the engineers are saying are approved assigned runs, but they might not always. Sometimes some senior line haul managers want to maintain all that information for themselves in their hub area. But in general, talking to that line haul manager, either in the hub, in the station, or the terminal, will give you an idea of what runs are going to be posted for bid. I usually, every 2 or 3 months, I'm constantly asking my senior line haul manager about what runs they're thinking about posting the bid. If I'm running consistently on the unassigned board, say a Memphis to Murfreesboro, or a Noki to, say, Geneva, I'll be like, well, when are you going to convert that one over to an assigned run? When are you going to bid that one out? Trying to understand the process and just make sure I'm prepared for it, and make sure I allocate points to wherever I need them most. For example, if I happen to have a lot of unassigned teams, I'm trying to convert those over to dedicated runs. And so I might allocate more points to a team run, because teams generally don't need as many points to win an assigned run, but it's a really attractive place where to allocate them because they're so lucrative. You get a good assigned team run. That's probably the most efficient way to generate revenue for your business.
Yeah, and I think a really important thing to understand as a new line haul contractor, or as somebody who's looking to enter the space, is that there is a lot of kind of, just understanding you have to have of your terminal that isn't going to be immediately apparent. It has to kind of come from building relationships and talking to the right people, whether that's people at your terminal, or people at terminal management, or other contractors at the terminal. Where you kind of have to do that work. It's where, we talk in line haul where it's not as important for you to be at the terminal physically for dispatch. It's not the same as P&D in that sense, but there's a lot of value in working and being present, or at least actively communicating with the management at the terminal, so that you can find out those things to have the right strategy in place, because growth is often a choice, or at least you have more control over where that growth comes from, or where you're investing resources in line haul. So there's a lot of kind of nuance that comes from having to talk to the right people, finding out the right things at the right time, and being ready for it.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember is that growth in the FedEx space, especially on line haul, is usually chunky and bumpy. Yeah. Okay, the reason why is, you think about it, every single trailer that the FedEx system adds to the network, that means that you just added 3,000 more stops to the P&D space. So if FedEx gets a new customer, say they get Nike, or they get Adidas, or they get Joe Schmo's baking shop, and that baking shop is going to ship another 3,000 packages, that's a new trailer that has to go into the system. And that's a new, potentially it might be a new carve out for a CSA.
Yeah.
So it's lumpy, it's bumpy, and it's a really good opportunity. And it's the one way that you can grow organically. And in one of my practices is I always try to have an unassigned tractor in each location that I operate in. So I have that opportunity to, if I'm happy with my run profile, I always have an opportunity to grow and add more dedicated routes to my route tree.
Yeah. I think that's actually a really important point for people to understand on the P&D side as to how sometimes, whole new CSAs or whole new stops are created, because there are changes that come to the FedEx network that, can impact, especially if you pull up a big customer, it can have big chunky effects on a CSA. So I think that is important, is that, FedEx is going to try to fill a trailer before they add a second one or add a new line, a new run. And so there is understanding how those growth patterns work, understanding how the sales team works on the FedEx side is important to understand how your growth could work.
And then the other thing to remember is that, or unassigned runs are typically how you grow within the FedEx space.
Yeah.
So within your own terminal, you're always going to be wanting to volunteer for unassigned runs. So if FedEx puts up an RFI, or if your terminal manager or senior manager asks you, hey, do you have any ability to add additional power? That's an opportunity for you to grow. And then from there, you have an unassigned run, then you add points to it, through successful peaks. Within a year or two, you can convert that unassigned run into an assigned run and build equity in your business. And along those same lines, like if you want to grow into a new location. So as I mentioned, I'm in Noki, I'm in Memphis, and I'm in Olive Branch. So in my footprint, maybe I want to grow into Champaign, or maybe I want to grow into Louisville or North Indy or South Indy, or grow into Little Rock. The easiest thing might be for me to buy one or two unassigned runs from a contractor, and then I can start trying to convert those into dedicated runs, and then grow my footprint into a new hub area.
Yeah, that's right. And it all comes back to what we're talking about, where if unassigns are often the most important ways that you secure growth, is those are the footholds, those are the ways to get additional runs. Then the challenge is converting them into dedicateds, if that is your goal, adding that consistency. And peak season and the distribution of those points is one of the biggest ways that you can take a giant leap forward in your point totals and make you more competitive in those bidding situations, as opposed to just waiting through the typical accumulation of points that happens year over year. Peak can let you really determine the right places to put that currency that is really investing in the future of your business, and putting it in the right places so it can have the most impact.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right, you have an unassigned run, say that you have no declines that year, right? You only get realistically 365 points. So to bid on a new run, you're looking at somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 points. So you might have to wait 6 to 10 years before you accumulate that many points. But if you have a successful peak and you allocate those points to that unassigned run, you can really quickly move from not having an assigned run to having one within only a year or two.
Yeah. And it's not just about the fact that it adds, profitability and margin to have a more consistent run and more mileage, but it, like you said earlier, it adds a lot to the equity of the business, of saying that you've added these consistent dedicated runs that'll impact, what the business is worth. So eventually when you exit, you've added more to your exit plan and that path. So it's not just the NOI you add to your business now, but the equity you add over time.
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about it, everybody gets into the FedEx space because of the stability of the revenue stream that you're able to project out there. Like I'm able to look at my assigned runs and know within a couple thousand miles, what I'm going to do for the next year. Yeah. I can predict within a margin of error, probably of 1% of what my revenue stream is going to be on that one track.
Yeah, and that's huge. There are very few businesses that look like that. And a lot of the expenses are exactly dictated on those mileage and that revenue projection. So you have a very clear sense of your margins for a whole year. And like I said, there are not very many businesses where you get that amount of consistency.
No, I mean, that's one of the things that attracted me to Linehaul in the first place, was the fact that I had the consistency of revenue, the able to project what my revenue is going to be, but then it's a very stable formula to determine what my expenses were going to be. Everything is a percentage of revenue. Everything is cents per mile. If you break everything back into cents per mile, then you're actually going to know what your margins are going to be. And it makes it really easy for you to project out, okay, when can I grow? Or when you go to a bank and say, hey, I have no accounts receivable because I get paid on time every Friday. And these are what my margins are every Friday, because all my information is just part of a formula. I know what my fuel is going to be. I know what my maintenance is going to be. I know what my payroll is going to be. You go to the bank like that, you can get a lot of financing made available to you.
Which obviously growth is expensive in line haul. So it is nice to be able to continue to secure financing, credit lines, whatever you need to keep adding those trucks and drivers as you're looking to find ways to grow in that chunky nature.
Yes, definitely.
Perfect. So that's the bulk of what we wanted to cover in content today. So as I'm going over the new inventory and the new events coming up, if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the Q&A. And then once I'm done, Alex and I will answer any questions you all may have. So first is there's two new listings this week. So the first is out of Florida. It is 10 P&D routes at 1.4 million. This is a very high margin business for P&D, about 25% margin and a manager. And there is some options to assume the truck debt as well, and a full-time manager on staff and mainly newer vehicles. Next one is out of Alabama. It is 19 P&D routes at 995,999. It has two managers, there's seller financing and debt assumption options as well. And again, a fleet of newer vehicles and up to 6 months of transition support, which is great from the seller. So those are the two new listings this week, Alabama and Florida. If you have questions about either of those or want to see more details, reach out to our team and we are happy to talk those through. Next is just some upcoming events we have to make sure y'all are aware of. So the first is we continue to have our new investor summits available on the FedEx side, which they are completely on demand. And those are a way for you to learn about the space and basically have a crash course where our goal at the end of it is that you can, one, decide whether or not FedEx is the right space for you, and two, decide whether or not P&D or line haul is the path that you want to pursue in that space. And so that is on demand. You can sign up for it and start watching immediately. And with those comes an opportunity to attend workshops as well. So we host workshops usually about one every other month, where everyone who has gone to one of those summits has the ability to come in person in Nashville, meet the team, meet experts, meet vendors, go over any questions you have, and talk about some additional things outside of the summit as a way to really continue to accelerate your journey from there. We also have happy hours throughout the year. So we tend to come to a bunch of different places and travel to you, try to make it a little bit easier than coming out to our office in Nashville so that you can meet us, meet other contractors in the area. It's a networking opportunity. Completely free to attend. We'll give you all the food and drinks you want. All you have to do is register. And so if you go to our event calendar, we just put it in the chat just now. You can check and see if we're headed your way at any point this year. The other main way you can connect with us throughout the year is the Expo, which is our giant contractor event where we host thousands of contractors every year. We are in Dallas this year, and it's the first week of August. Again, completely free to attend. We provide, again, the food, the drink. The event is free to attend as well. All of the parties and all of the excitement that you'll get to experience. The only thing you need to make sure to do is, one, register, and two, try to sign up for that hotel block. We do sell out of that hotel block. And ideally, you'll get to stay at that hotel. It makes things convenient. It's a really nice Gaylord property in Dallas. So hopefully you'll be able to get there before those sell out. Now, other than that, all of that is in the chat. Any questions you have on that are there where you can click on it and get all the details. So we will jump over to Q&A. We got a couple here. So I'll start, and this is a broad one for you, Alex. So
Okay.
how did you grow? Was it through financing, or was it through purchases, or did it look different ways at different times?
Yeah, so there's many different ways to grow. I bought my first 4 runs with cash. I paid a little bit over $800,000 for it. I happened to be able to grow that way. My next opportunity to grow, and then actually in between me going from Memphis to Northern Kentucky, I actually had a line haul manager who said, "Hey, I need extra power. We're really growing really fast. I need to know how many tractors you can provide me." And I was like, I can provide maybe 1 or 2. Let me see if I can go get some financing available and provide you with some trucks. He said, "Just give me an RFI and we'll take care of it." And he gave me 2 unassigned teams and an unassigned solo. And I had more runs than I know what to do with, and wasn't aware of what was going on exactly. I mean, literally I started as a contractor in February and I had new runs in May, and I was like, it's kind of sink or swim.
Yeah.
There. was made aware of a situation in the northern Kentucky, and I used bank financing in that situation to buy 13 runs. And then from there, I've grown organically. So I grew organically within Noki. I've grown additional runs into Memphis, and then I grew organically into Olive Branch as well.
And when you say
Branch is a unique
organically,
situation because Olive Branch and Memphis are actually 19 miles apart, but they're in two different districts within the Gulf region. But one is Mississippi Valley, the other is the Gulf District. So it's really attractive because historically there's been limits on how big you're allowed to grow into each of the hub areas. And by being in Memphis and Olive Branch, it means I'm in two different hub areas. One is Memphis, the other is Olive Branch, but I can grow up to the limits in each of those.
yeah, and there's only a few of those places across the country where there's kind of sister hubs right across the district line. And they're really attractive if you can get into them, because usually both of those, basically, if it's come to the point where you need two hubs that are 19 miles apart, then that means there's a lot of volume coming in and out of there. So there should be a lot of opportunities there as well. And like Alex said, it gives you the opportunity to grow on either side of that district line, but really, you can use the same drivers and trucks, and there's ways to share resources, or at least to convert a truck from one business to the other, just because although you're at two different terminals, they're 20 minutes from each other.
Yes. So I mean, it takes a little bit of higher level math, but or higher level complexities, but there are a lot of advantages you can get out of it. You just have to understand how to work the system between where you want to domicile your tractors versus where you want to onboard your drivers, and vice versa. There's also tax implications that you want to talk to your accountant with, because, for example, Tennessee is a no tax state, so I pay no income taxes there, but I pay asset taxes. So I want to limit the number of tractors I have domiciled in Tennessee, whereas Mississippi has no asset tax, but has an income tax. So I want to limit the amount of income I derive in Mississippi, but I want to maximize the number of tractors that I have there.
Yeah. And those are things that if you don't plan into your strategy can have a big impact on your bottom line. You just don't realize it. You're just paying taxes and not thinking about where you should put your tractors, what types of entities you should have, and so whether you are skilled in that or just use your accountant, which most of the time I say, have a good accountant, talk it through with them. They'll probably know more about that than you will, and help you make those right decisions.
Yeah, and to go back to the question previously, so talking about different ways to finance your business and how do you grow. So there's a lot of different levers you can pull, and so you actually want to have a capital strategy about what you're going to do with your balance sheet, because you have a lot of assets, okay, and you have really dependable revenue stream. So when you grow, when you decide to add tractors, you can do one of three things, right? Or one of four things, actually. You can buy that tractor for cash. Now, if you happen to have somewhere between $156,000 and $200,000 sitting on the sidelines, and you don't have a place to put it to work, go ahead, buy that tractor. That's a great place. Otherwise, what you can try to do is maximize that dollar, and you can finance it either through the original equipment manufacturer. So think of like PACCAR or Detroit. They have financing solutions for Freightliner or Volvo Finance. I mean, all these different equipment manufacturers, you can finance through there. You can finance through your traditional bank. So think of Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and BMO all have big, what they call rolling stock financing solutions. Then you have the third-party financiers like AP Finance. They're a big financer of new and used tractors. And then the last option is to go the lease route, and you can lease through the three big lessors within the FedEx world are Ryder, Penske, and REL. And they all have their advantages and disadvantages, and they all have different tax treatments. So you really want to think about your strategy and think about what makes the most sense for you, and talk to your accountant about those situations.
Yeah, because they do all have significant tax implications. And you mentioned something earlier that I'm going to come back to, but there was a second question in the Q&A that comes right into where you're already talking. So when you're thinking through, truck debt assumption or financing of vehicles versus SBA, have you ever used an SBA option and looked at that?
So I never bought a business that was a complete standalone business where it was eligible for the SBA. So SBA is really attractive. You don't have to put as much money down. You get really attractive long terms for it. I mean, you pay sometimes a little bit higher interest rate, sometimes a little bit lower interest rate. But the biggest thing is that you have to have 1 year's worth of financials, and you have to have a business that's not a carve out. And route consultants can help you identify opportunities that look for SBA financing and where and what banks actually fund SBA financing, but it was never an option for me in my situation. So I went the traditional bank financing, which is a shorter term of loans. You're typically looking at 5 to 7 years, and I had to put more cash down. Now, luckily, in the times where I've actually acquired runs from other contractors, my business generated enough cash that I was able to put a down payment using the business's net operating income, and then got a loan through Bank of America for my business. But you can generally work with, you don't need to go with the big bank route. I just happen to have a relationship with Bank of America. In general, a lot of contractors have had a tremendous amount of success with credit unions and their local banks. So if you happen to be in Little Rock, use Bank of the Ozarks. If you happen to be in Oklahoma, look at, talking to Bank of Oklahoma. If you're in out west, maybe talk to Bank of the West or City National. Some of these smaller banks that have small business lending arms, they might be a good opportunity for you to take out a business loan. Some of them also do rolling stock financing, but if not, reach out and I can put you in touch with the guys at Wells Fargo or Bank of America or BMO.
Yeah, and I think that advice on regional level banks is really important. Usually the thing is you want to be able to talk to the decision maker on the loan. If it's a large bank and you don't have any way to cement any kind of relationship there, then it's difficult to get something that may be a first or something they don't do very often. In a FedEx deal, maybe that's something they haven't done previously. Those new situations are harder to get approved if you don't have contacts with someone who can make that decision. And so regional banks are often a lot more flexible when it comes to those than you'll find at the typical, large national banks.
And the other thing is that you want to have that line of credit. So if you have that relationship with a small regional bank, getting that line of credit available, you don't typically ever need to use it, but it gives you peace of mind to have access to it. And that means also that you don't have to keep as much cash in the business.
Yeah, and jumping back to the SBA point, like Alex said, the biggest benefit, it's a 10-year loan, which is great, just purely from a cash flow perspective. But the biggest challenge on the SBA side is that there are fewer number of deals that can qualify for it, just based on the criteria the SBA has laid out. And also, when it comes to the SBA, there are additional fees. Typically, they'll roll that into the value of the loan. They'll spread it out over 10 years. But you'll be paying interest on those fees. Now, the question also asked a little bit about truck debt assumption. And my thoughts on, just as a quick overview for those who don't know, if a business currently has debt that exists on the trucks as a part of the purchase, you may be able to assume that debt and discount the purchase price accordingly. The important thing to know there is just understanding, what the terms of that loan are, and if they're terms that you want to inherit and continue to pay for the life of that loan. But often, especially if those loans, originated a couple of years ago, you're going to see better interest rates than what are in the market right now. And so if you can inherit and maintain those rates, that can be a big advantage compared to financing with interest rates where they are right now.
Yeah, and there's fine print there that you want to read. I mean, the biggest advantage obviously is reducing the cost of the business that you're buying by assuming that truck debt. The disadvantages are you don't know what the terms are, so you need to really pay attention to the term. And then the other thing that you really want to do is you want to do a good inspection of those vehicles. Look, trucks last forever. I mean, I think that was the biggest thing I didn't understand and didn't know. I mean, I didn't realize that you drove a tractor 60,000 miles before getting an oil change. I didn't realize the tires lasted to be somewhere between 75,000 and 150,000 miles. I have tractors on the road right now. Actually, I just dropped a new engine in a tractor that had 850,000 miles on it because the frame was great. The transmission was in great shape. The after treatment I had just replaced. And in my mind, I could run this tractor with a new engine in it for another 400,000 or 500,000 miles. And I would save the cost of buying a new tractor, which as we talked about, was $150,000 to $200,000 for spending only $30,000 on an engine. So you want to do that inspection and understand what you're buying and understanding the terms, because banks will throw in prepayment penalties because they want that interest rate. They want that understanding that you're going to have that tractor and that loan on for 5 to 6 years. And that's the typical loan for a tractor is 5 to 6 years. So make sure you read the fine print, talk to your lawyer to understand the legal terms. But it's a really attractive way to expand and grow into a business.
Yeah, and it's much more likely that you'll be able to assume truck debt than SBA finance. Just, there's a ton of deals that can have truck debt that you assume, whereas SBA is a much narrower set of deals that can qualify. So it may be that if you're comparing the two options, SBA is not even an option. So it could be truck debt financing is one of the best ways for you to kind of close a gap and enable you to cover the rest with maybe some combination of cash and seller financing as a way to get the deal done without ever really using a bank outside of the truck financing.
But the biggest thing that you really want to evaluate whether or not you decide to go the route of assuming truck debt or taking on an SBA loan or doing a more traditional bank loan is you really want to understand the vehicles and what their expected life is, and also what kind of run construction you're buying. So say you're buying 6 team runs. Well, if you're assuming truck debt on 3 or 4 year old trucks that all have 500 to 750,000 miles on them and no longer have any warranty, that's really not the truck debt that you want to assume. In that situation, it's more advantageous to you to either just say, okay, I'm just going to buy the business. You keep the trucks and figure out what you want to do with them. Or I'll take on the trucks, but I'm not going to assume your truck debt. And then make the decision whether or not you want to go the new truck route or do you want to lease your trucks. Because these are teams and you typically want to replace a team truck every 2 to 2.5 years, depending on the number of miles. You really don't want a team truck out on the road that's running through its warranty. You want to have the peace of mind that it has a warranty so that if you have a breakdown in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, you can take it to the local Freightliner or Kenworth or Volvo dealer, and they're going to effect repairs on it.
Yeah, because those teams runs, it's much more likely that they are in a random location in the middle of nowhere, and it's just inevitable that that's where they break. They'll never break in the middle of, downtown or at a location that's convenient.
Most of my tractors, for some random reason, break down in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, on a day that's like 99 degrees, and there hasn't been a drop of rain in months.
Yeah. That's how it goes. It's the only way it can go. So as much as you can do to protect yourself from those situations, and whether it's you're working on a warranty, which that is the peace of mind that is best, or also on top of that, working with any kind of towing company or mechanics in areas that you're regularly traveling through, that you have some kind of network you can call on in the event of those breakdowns that will just inevitably happen, is that you rest on your laurels and it's the one location you forgot of. So as much as you can protect yourself in that manner and prepare for the worst, the better off you'll be the rest of the year.
Definitely.
And then a last part of this question here is, there may be something you can add. It may just be based on what we've already covered, but is there anything you could point to the outside of just normal point accumulation that you do to try to either any other way you generate points during the year, or anything that you kind of specifically try to target during peak season to have the most?
So one of the things that I do is that I always have spare tractors in all my terminals that I operate in. One, it's just a good practice to have. So for every 4 or 5 tractors or so, I have one spare tractor. So that in the event that I have a tractor that goes down for maintenance, I know that I'm never going to lose that run because I don't have a tractor available. I might lose a run because my drivers call off, but I never want to lose a run because I didn't have a tractor that's up. So one of the things I've always made my terminals aware, and the line haul planners and the dispatchers is that all my managers are driving. Okay, they're all available to drive. They don't drive regularly, but they're all available to drive. And so if there's ever a rescue that's needed, pick me. I'll do the rescue. Because in a rescue, if your freight makes service, 1, you get paid for the entire run, and 2, you get 50 points that you can allocate across any truck. And so it's really attractive to be known as the go-to guy in your terminal, because you get a lot of opportunities about it. On a day where the wheel spins, and the wheel is the unassigned run rotation, I know that my terminals are going to call me first and say, hey, I know you got 3 spare tractors sitting in the yard. You want to run some equipment to Chicago. You want to run some equipment to, South Indy. I'll take that. That's an extra, 100 or 300 miles that I wasn't expecting. I'll do that in a heartbeat. That's a way for you to generate additional revenue. That's a way for you to incentivize your managers or your part-time drivers and give them some extra work and keep everybody happy.
Yeah. And that's huge. I think a lot of people don't even know recoveries exist, and two, don't realize that it can have that much of a revenue benefit and that you get points on top of it. So one, understanding that revenue opportunity is huge. Two, the flip side of it is understanding why a rescue would happen, which is basically you had a run and you failed to deliver it. And so they have to send somebody else out to pick up your load.
Yeah.
And so not only is that bad from FedEx's view, but you don't get paid for that run. Somebody else is getting paid for that run. So it's a big deal to have some kind of service violation where you need a rescue. So understanding the downside of that ever happening to you, but also really the potential upside if you can build a business with the structure, the spares, and the contingency to be able to be that resource for a terminal is huge.
And understand that breakdowns are going to occur.
Yeah.
I've had 26 runs. I've had a breakdown in every single one of them. Okay. I've had, anything from, I've had some really crazy breakdowns. I've had a trailer catch on fire because the brakes locked up on it. I've had, airlines disconnect. I've had blown tires. I've had a serpentine belt go bad. I actually had a situation where my driver put DEF into the wrong tank, which is you don't ever want to happen. But, in the middle of Lafayette, Indiana, he decided to put the DEF into the gas tank. And that is a disaster for a tank, or for a tractor. Luckily, my insurance covered, the error, but I couldn't make service on those trailers. And so Chicago had to send somebody down to Lafayette to grab my trailers for me. So that contractor who grabbed those trailers, got the 50 points and got paid for my run. And I didn't. So, it happens. Trust me, your drivers do make mistakes, and, you can't be perfect on maintenance. You try to do the best you can. You reiterate to your drivers that they need to do their pre-trip inspections. They need to, look at that tractor every single time they get out and fuel up. But, stuff happens. You see it on your own personal vehicle, it's going to happen on your tractor.
Yeah. And it's, knowing that there are situations like that, obviously you prepare as much as you can, but what that also just points to is if you have some way to perform recoveries for other people, it also helps kind of backfill for the times where things don't go great on your end. You've got a Band-Aid to cover over it and add extra points in revenue too. So, it's about always in this space, preparing for the worst, and then being able to deploy your resources effectively in ways beyond just what you're, assumed, kind of your base level of service, but finding ways that you can deploy those resources to generate extra revenue or work with FedEx to generate extra goodwill. Sometimes that's just as important.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point there, Josh. My motto within my company and what I try to constantly reiterate with my managers is that we always prepare for the worst situations, and then we try to execute to the best situations. Okay, but we're always having standard operating procedures in our employee handbook and within our company about how to handle the worst situation, what to do in a breakdown, what to do in a delay at dispatch, what to do in a delay at a bump or a meet, what to do if you have an accident. All these standard operating procedures and rules and requirements and how do we operate in order to make sure that we can always execute in those situations. But in general, on a daily basis, we're always trying to execute to the best.
Yeah, that's right. We had another question that just popped in. Did you ever purchase used trucks, or did you always go new or lease new?
So I monitor the market quite aggressively, and I'm always looking at what is most advantageous for me between buying new tractors, buying used tractors, leasing new trucks, or buying old leases, or dropping, like I said, refurbished engines or new engines into an old tractor. So I'm always doing a math or a functionality. I'm looking at tractors, and if I buy a used tractor, my plan is that I want it to be able to run for at least 3 years, and I want to be able to generate excess revenue over what I paid for it. So I look at it as almost a return on investment in that tractor. So my goal is I project out what I think I can earn on that tractor, and I'm looking to try to make somewhere between 17 to 20% over what it cost me to buy that used tractor. On a new tractor, it's a different story because I know I'm getting pristine maintenance, and it's more a question of how long do I think I can project out that tractor is going to last. So if I buy a brand new day cab, I'm projecting out that I'm not replacing that tractor for 7 or 8 years. So a tractor that I buy in 2020 is probably going to be with me in 2027 or 2028. Like, I'm going to run that tractor until it hits somewhere between 850 and 1.25 million miles. The engine, when I replace an engine, I'm spending somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 on that engine. So it's that same return on investment that I'm looking at. Okay, so if I spend that $30,000 or $40,000 and I think it's going to last me for 400 to 500,000 miles, which is 3 to 4 years, then am I generating enough excess income to generate the return on investment that I need, which is somewhere around 20% is what I'm looking for. And then finally, on leases, I'm constantly looking at lease terms and understanding what they offer me and what they provide versus what I can do on my own in the new truck market. In the new truck market, I know I can always depreciate that asset and not have to pay, and it reduces the net my income taxes. Either as a business entity or, since we're all S corps, as a pass-through entity into my own personal income. So, that's something that you really want to think about and understand and talk to your accountant with, because depreciation makes or breaks your business. But on the leases, I'm looking at, okay, what are the terms of that capital lease? And what are the terms of that operating lease? What are the differences? And what are the advantages of each one? Because one reduces my net income because it's an expense. The other one reduces my net income because it's on my books and I can depreciate on it. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both. And then what you want to do is you want to compare it versus the cost of that new tractor, because where I'm able to buy a new tractor as a small TSP is not as cheap that large leasing company, whether it's Ryder, Penske, or REL, can buy. I mean, REL will really spell it out to you and tell you, okay, this is the cost to own this tractor for the time horizon that you have the lease on hand. And so it gives you a really good understanding and comparing apples to apples and deciding what makes the most sense for you.
Yeah. And I think that's just important for people to understand, is that, there's a lot of nuance in making those decisions, and it depends on your territory, what kind of mileage you're doing, is it teams or is it solos? What does the market look like? What are the prices on these various things? And there are lots of people who will just choose one method or the other and not really change anything because it's worked. But as much as you can monitor that, as much as that, if you have the level of detail and rigor that Alex is talking about here of analyzing how much return you can get from each of those vehicles, it's going to have the biggest impact on your bottom line and your ability to run successfully, beyond just choosing a strategy and running with it.
There's many different methods and ways to skin the cat about how you're going to run your business. But as an AO, you can decide to do all the BC functions yourself and dispatch your trucks and handle maintenance and, do recruiting and stuff like that. But if you want to grow and scale your business to get to the point where you're doing multiple $1 million in revenue, then you want to start setting up a structure where your manager or your BC is going to be able to handle a lot of those day-to-day operations, so you can focus on the big picture items. Like, how do you strategically grow your business? How do you strategically position your business to make the most effective use of finance and banking solutions? And how are you going to shelter as much as possible your income so you're limiting the amount of taxes that you're paying? So I speak to my accountant probably more than he really wants to talk to me. I have his cell phone number. I text him, I'll come up with a random idea and I'll text him at 5 p.m. at night, or sometimes he's getting texts at 8 a.m. in the morning. Like, there's no time or day. Like, I'll read an article or I'll listen to a podcast and be like, hey, I wonder if I can do that in my business. So so your accountant is your best friend. You want to have a good lawyer and you want to have a good accountant. The lawyer to review your contracts, to understand, what kind of, what are the relationships you're getting into with your vendor, and then your accountant to figure out, okay, how do I pay the least amount of money to Uncle Sam as possible?
Yeah. And there are a lot of different ways that works. And so that is what they studied. That is what they spent their life preparing for. So let them be the one to help you find the best ways to manage that bottom line so that your taxes are as minimal as possible. But Totally agree with you there. A good accountant and a good lawyer can't emphasize enough how important that is for your ongoing health of your business.
I mean, the other thing is you want good, trustworthy BCs, somebody who can manage the operation. I mean, you almost want to have good cop, bad cop. Okay. You want your manager to be the disciplinarian, to holding your drivers accountable. And you want to be the guy who, makes it rain for your drivers. So when your drivers are having a good day or having a bad day, you're there to call them up and cheer them up. You reward your drivers with like small things. Like one of the things I did in the past and my drivers love is we do jackets. So all my drivers this year got bomber jackets that are bright yellow with reflective material on it to say, my company's name on the breast, and on the back of it, it says, we keep our country rolling forward. And my drivers all love it. They really appreciate it. They don't want to wear that safety vest, and there's no uniform that you need to have as a truck driver within the FedEx Ground space compared to P&D. So you can outfit your drivers however you want, as long as they're wearing protective equipment, something that is highly visible. So it has to be ANSI rated.
Perfect. Yeah, those are great ideas, and we'll talk through, all those types of things and more in the future. But I think for today, we'll go ahead and call it there. So Alex, thank you so much for being here, answering everybody's questions, helping everybody think through what is a really important period over these next few weeks and months as they're thinking about how to strategize around peak season and peak points to distribute properly.
Well, thank you, Josh. Thanks for having me on here. And it was great talking to all you. And I look forward to, seeing your comments. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody. We will see you all next week on the next webinar.